unfortunately, as well, in the books this week. So this week, coming into today, February 11th, you have some teams that have played upwards of 15 or 16 games. Things like Edmonton, Toronto, who have really not missed a game at all, had any issues. And then you have other teams like New Jersey's only played 9. Pretty much the whole West Division has played 10 or 11. And there's still plenty of teams that are going to be out for a while with COVID issues. So this is kind of the point in the season where the league is going to have to have prepared for alternative solutions and being able to reschedule games. As of today, or as of yesterday, sorry, the Devils have 19 guys on the COVID list. The Wild have 11. The Sabres have 9. The Sabres already have the next 3 games canceled. Colorado's got 3. Chicago's got a couple. The Kings have a couple. Almost half the league has at least one guy on the COVID-19 protocol list. So over 40 games rescheduled have to be rescheduled at this point. And despite that, some teams are already discussing allowing fans back into the arena. Of course, some teams have had fans in the arena all year, but others, such as the Rangers, have made announcements about how they're going to be allowing about 200 fans. But that being said, there are still a few games tonight. Actually, a bunch of games tonight. Penguins and the Islanders is playing tonight. Tampa and Florida. Tampa, of course, to this point 9-1-1. 19 out of a possible 22 points for them this season. And Chicago, Detroit, Nashville, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Montreal, Carolina, Dallas, and almost pretty much all league that is eligible to play tonight without COVID issues will be playing tonight. Hopefully all those games can get in. 2 of them have already been pushed back. The Oilers games, Oilers Montreal has already been pushed back. Trying to make sure time. But to this point in the season, Toronto at 11-2-1, 23 points, point percentage of 82 or 821. And Boston, point percentage of 833, 9-1-2, 20 points in 12 games. And then Tampa Bay, as I said, 19 points in 22 games. So Tampa Bay, Boston, Toronto, and Vegas leading the way. Vegas 17 points, but only 10 games played. The fewest games played of any division leader. The West has had the most COVID issues of any division. And for the most part, other things started out a little bit differently. The good teams have shown themselves as expected, and the bad teams as well. Detroit and Buffalo and Ottawa, all assumed to be the 3 worst teams in their division. The worst team in each of their 3 divisions at the bottom of their divisions now. Ottawa is really the only terrible team in that division. Vancouver, who I actually predicted to win the division, is in next to last place in front of Ottawa. I mean, everyone's much better than Ottawa, but still Vancouver has looked pretty terrible in their series against Edmonton and Montreal and Toronto. So the Canucks really have kind of a make or break series coming up against Calgary this weekend. They play today and then Saturday and then again on Monday. And really, if they then that might be the end. I think it's kind of still make it Vancouver has looked terrible all season, and in a short season like this, I mean, if they lose 3 more games against Calgary, who's right ahead of them in the standings, that really could be the end of it. I mean, they would be 6-13 through 19 games. 19 games is about 40% of the way through the season. Toronto, Montreal, especially Toronto, but Montreal and Edmonton as well, not looking like they're really going to let up. And there's really not a lot of leeway for the Canucks to get really hot. So I think this is a huge weekend for Vancouver as they kind of try and claw out 6th spot in the division. Because unfortunately for all these teams, you can't really play Ottawa every night, and as much as all of them would like to, because the Senators have 2-11-1 minus 27 goal differential. and then he'll go that offense last year. So Ottawa having a couple of young players, Tim Sitzel, the third overall pick, Kachuk, they look pretty terrible, and that minus 27 goal difference after 14 games is very ugly. But Vancouver, it looks like, I mean, at this point, unless they go into some sort of run, then they're not going to make the playoffs. So really, it's kind of down to this 5-team race because Calgary's only a point ahead of Vancouver, but they at least have the ability, I think, to go on more of a run and kind of get and climb the standings pretty quickly because, of course, with the standings this year, with the playoffs this year, there's no wild cards, just the top 4 teams make it. So Toronto is the presumptive division winner, and they've looked like it all year. They have pretty much dominated all year against almost all competition. Even last night against Montreal, right behind them in the standings. And Montreal looked great this year too, but Toronto dominated them. And I think for Toronto, the Leafs just their offense and their defense, they just have so much depth throughout their roster that they're able to kind of just beat teams later in games. Like versus Montreal, they were tied going into the third period yesterday, and then the Leafs ended up winning that one by 4-2. So they kind of took it in the third period, 3 goals in the third, but just the depth with after Austin Matthews, who's arguably the best scorer in the league right now. After Matthews, Marner, Zach Hyman, Nylander, Wayne Simmons, Tavares, Jumbo Joe, they just have so much depth in the team that they kind of are being able to outplay teams late in games. So it really kind of presumptive that Toronto will win the division. But then after them, 3 more teams are going to get in, and it's probably, unless Vancouver, I'm sure Ottawa won't, but unless Vancouver, gets out of this slump, which doesn't look like it, it's going to be Montreal, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary for 2 spots. And that'll be a really tough race because they are really close together. I mean, even in points, it's Calgary with 13 and Montreal with 18, separating 2 or 5. But Calgary, I think, has the ability to kind of climb up to that 2 spot if they could. I mean, they've made playoff runs the last couple of years, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them do that. But Montreal has looked great this year so far, and really in a season like this, the same way that Vancouver has been pretty terrible, and their season might be over before it's halfway through. Montreal, I mean, you don't need to be as good for as long either. If Montreal can hang on to this for another 15, 20 games, then they may not. Then they would be able to afford being a little bit worse in the second half of the year, and they wouldn't even fall out of playoffs. So between Montreal, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, obviously, it's going to be really fun when they all play each other because they start playing each other so much down the stretch. That would be great to see. But especially Edmonton, because of course everybody wants to see McDavid and Draisaitl in the playoff race and making playoff runs, especially after last year when they couldn't even beat Chicago, who wouldn't even have made the playoffs in a normal playoff year, or in a normal year with typical playoffs. So that'll be a really fun race to watch down the last 35 games of the season. Will be that North Division race Toronto. And then going to the East Division, Boston leading the way. They've actually played only 12 games, whereas Philadelphia just played 13 right behind them. But Boston is pretty comfortable leading that division. 9-1-2, 20 points. Philadelphia is second, 18 points. Philadelphia, I picked to win the division at the beginning of the year. I actually thought Boston had gotten a lot worse, and Boston was going to fall around right up to the cusp of the playoffs. Boston has really looked great. They've gotten really important wins against the other teams in the division. They beat Philadelphia a couple times, beaten Washington, split with them. So Boston's gotten those important wins when they need to, and they've also beaten up on New Jersey and Buffalo, who are at the bottom of the division. And they beat the Rangers in overtime last night. Came back to beat the Rangers at the Garden on the road. That doesn't have to win you need to get to win the division. Those teams like in this division will be Buffalo, New Jersey, and evidently the Rangers on the road. Points against them. That's how a team will be able to win in this division. Dealing with a bunch of COVID issues they had between the Oshie and Jacob Brana out for a while. Back now, Oshie said he would have played against Philadelphia on Tuesday if that game hadn't been rescheduled. So Washington, they would get their footing back as they get players back, but they obviously were missing all the Russians for a while. They slowly came back. But in a season like this, I mean, you really can't afford to be missing too many games. That's why it's going to come into play, and I think there's going to be some team somewhere that is going to make the playoffs, although that otherwise wouldn't have, because it's just another team, had too many guys go down. In this division, I mean, I thought that could be the Rangers. Doesn't look like at this point, but Pittsburgh, I would be surprised to see them in the playoffs just because they're older and they've like steadily gotten older and worse. And as we've seen them against in the playoffs the last couple of years, haven't been great. So I do think it's going to be in some order: Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, and the Islanders that ended up in the playoffs. Moving on to the Central Division, Tampa has obviously looked great as assumed. I mean, they have really all the all their main pieces, and Steven Stamkos has been fantastic. He's moving the way for them. Even with Nikita Kucherov out the entire season, I mean, he scored 130 points just 2 seasons ago. Hip surgery out the entire season, but it's another team with such depth that, like Toronto, Tampa Bay with such depth that they were going to succeed very well even without Nikita Kucherov the whole season. I mean, Steven Stamkos has been spectacular. Him and Braden Point both 14 points this year. Victor Hedman, Anthony Cirelli, Sergachev, they just have so much depth that they're able to survive and kind of stay afloat even without some major pieces out. Also, Florida. That's the game tonight with Tampa Bay and Florida. Florida, nobody's expecting to do well, but they've actually played fewer games than Tampa Bay. And if they win today, they'll have a game in hand and only be a point back. So this will be a huge one for Florida. Really, yeah, like I said, nobody's really expected they're going to be in this spot, but they're second in the division. They're firmly in a playoff spot right now with 16 points ahead of Chicago and Columbus. Although there's a little logjam there from the 6 seed Dallas to the 2 seed Florida is only 3 points. Carolina, Chicago, Columbus, all in there. Detroit is expected to be not doing anything like Ottawa. Nashville is kind of expected to spot. They haven't so far. They've looked pretty bad, 5-8. Their team like Calgary, they go on a run. It wouldn't be shocking to see them go on a run and get a playoff spot. But there's just so many teams stuck in there with this four teams per division making the playoffs type of system. You just have to get, and especially when you play your whole schedule within the division, it's just so many wins that are so important. Like for Columbus, who I thought was going to be a fringe playoff team, they've got to get wins. Carolina, Chicago, Dallas. Games like that, they're not going to climb too high in the standings, and then they're not going to catch, Tampa Bay, of course. But a team like Columbus, especially after their big trade they made last week, Patrick Laine, who's benched, but they're playing Chicago tonight, and then again on Saturday, and then Carolina, and then Nashville twice, and back to Chicago. So there's really no breaks in the schedule for any team, but especially a team like Columbus, who kind of who arguably won't be able to stay in it for too long. But if they can beat teams like Chicago, who they're probably better than, and then we'll see how Florida does throughout the year. As good as they've looked so far, 7-1-2. Florida hasn't had as tough of a schedule, and talent-wise, on paper, they probably aren't as good as Columbus either. But in theory, Columbus and Carolina should be able to take over playoff spots, and then some other combination of Florida, Dallas, Nashville will be in there too. But this is probably the toughest division to predict at this point because other than Tampa Bay, pretty confident in both of those. 2-7 is really could be anywhere. It could be Nashville, Dallas, Carolina. It could be Chicago, Florida, Columbus, or anything else. But that'll probably be the most fun division to see just because it's so unpredictable at this point. Going to the West Division, another one that is kind of very top heavy in that it was 3 really good teams, 3 really bad teams, and then 1 in the middle. Was my idea at the beginning of the year. Of course, 3 California teams in this division. None of them made playoffs last year. All 3 California teams were left out of that 2014 field, and 2 of them are in 7th and 8th place, and then the Ducks are 5th. So of those teams, they're in 5th, 7th, and 8th. It's pretty predictable. San Jose, Los Angeles, Anaheim not looking very good, and then of course Vegas, St. Louis, and Colorado at the top. So all pretty predictable in that regard. Three really good teams at the top, three really bad teams, and then Minnesota and Arizona as the last two in there. I mean, Minnesota and Arizona, one of them, assuming that one of these California teams doesn't surprisingly get very good. Minnesota or Arizona, one of them is going to make playoffs as that fourth seed to play St. Louis, Colorado, or Vegas, whoever the top seed is. But that makes games between Arizona and St. Louis even more important. And Arizona, who just had a couple games against Colorado postponed, now plays St. Louis tomorrow and Saturday. And tomorrow, Saturday, and Monday. So they play 3 games in 4 days against the Blues. And this is just such a peculiar year that like you don't see this stuff ever. But they play a team that's the most important team for them to beat because you need to. I mean, that's the one playoff spot left, and they're going to need to beat teams like St. Louis. And like their games against the Wild both got postponed last week as well. So Arizona is going to need to beat teams like St. Louis. And they have 3 games against them in 4 days before they play 4 against the California teams. So there's really no break in the schedule, but a team like Arizona that's fighting for their playoff life there, they're going to need to get wins over those good teams, Vegas, St. Louis, and Colorado as much as they can, and then pick up on the bad teams. And then their series versus Minnesota are really going to be what's going to decide it. To look at the league going on today, as I said, a lot of teams are starting to talk about when they're going to be allowing fans back in the arena, which kind of seems a little bit tone deaf, just because so many teams are dealing with like severe COVID, not necessarily severe cases, but if they have 15, 20 people among the coaching staff and players that have positive. Talking about allowing fans. In fact, the Sabres even have, and they have more COVID cases than anyone in the league. Just off the Sabres roster, Dahlin, Taylor Hall, Jake McCabe, Casey Middleton, almost 12 of them at this point have tested positive on the list. So some teams are starting to allow fans back. It seems a little early to talk about that, especially if they have so many players on the COVID list. Wanted to look at the stats real quick because, of course, stats might be a little quirky this year with the shortened schedule and a different schedule. But despite that, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, who really will lead it in any format, leading the league in points, just the two of them. But as I talked about Toronto and Tampa with their depth earlier, there's no greater example of the opposite of that than Edmonton, who is so top heavy with arguably the 2 most electric players in the league. And McDavid and Draisaitl. I think Draisaitl is the best passer in the league. McDavid is the best player in the league on the same line. It's really kind of unstoppable. McDavid and Draisaitl, and then just not much after them. But they lead the league with 27 and 25 points. So Connor McDavid at this point, 27 points in 15 games. So him and Draisaitl, as amazing as it sounds, could break 100 points in this shortened season. And to put that in perspective, I remember a few years ago, Jamie Benn won the Art Ross with 87 points in a standard season. To go within like maybe 4 or 5 years, whatever it was, or someone winning Art Ross with 87 points in an 82-game season to 2 guys on the same line will almost definitely break 87 points and beat that, and could possibly hit 100 in a 56-game season. It just shows how much the outbursts of offense in the league, as well as the rule changes, are trying to gain more offense, and how McDavid and Draisaitl, the 2 of them playing together especially, is taking full advantage of that. After them, Mitch Marner, 21 points. Again, on another team like that, we have so much, or a team that not similar to Edmonton, but where he has players as close to McDavid and Draisaitl as you're going to get, surrounding him with Tavares and Matthews, etc. Then the rest of the list, I mean, it's fairly standard. James Van Riemsdyk, another up-and-coming team in Philadelphia. Patrick Kane, who's been top point getter for a decade. And the opposite of that, Quinn Hughes, a young guy who barely missed out on the Calder Trophy last year. I mean, any other year he probably would have won it if it wasn't Cale Makar in the same rookie year. And as for goalies, Peter Mrazek leads the league, the only guy with a GAA below 1. And Carolina, they're kind of putting all their hopes on him at this point. So anything Carolina has to make the playoffs in that division, in that Central Division, is going to be on Peter Mrazek. who's looked fantastic so far, and especially the same way we say you need a hot goalie in to especially as you said how they say in the playoffs, you need a hot goalie to kind of get through the playoffs in a shortened season like this. Probably need a hot goalie just to get by, especially with all the COVID cases. But with only 30 games left in the season, so 30, 35 games left in the season, you're gonna need a guy like Peter Mrazek to keep this up. And additionally, he is a 955 save percentage, which is top 3 in the league. So that's something to look out for. Is who can have a hot goalie right now in Carolina with Peter Mrazek is that. So as we do every week, I wanted to look at the rookie point leaders, the Calder Trophy. Kirill Kaprizov in Minnesota leading the league still. He's had a few highlight reel plays. In the beginning of the year, in the first year of the year against Los Angeles, he had a spectacular goal. And he's kind of kept that up despite being in such a tough division for Minnesota with arguably 3 of the top 5 teams in the league in Vegas, St. Louis, and Colorado. Minnesota has had a tough schedule, and he's looked great. So far, I would say Kirill Kaprizov to be the Calder Trophy winner. Guy like Tim Stützle has been exciting, but his team has been so bad, and he hasn't shown as much as he can just because they're playing such tough competition in that division. And Tim Stützle has been exciting, but I really don't think what he's done so far has been able to warrant putting him up in the Calder discussion. So some upcoming games this weekend that'll be really good to watch, really exciting to watch, and hopefully will kind of help things. Well, hopefully will happen. First of all, because some of them are all pending COVID cases, but especially series coming up that would be really good. So Pittsburgh and the Islanders playing today, and then also later this weekend. That's a big game in the Mass Mutual East Division, as they're right on the brink of the last playoff spot. The Islanders in the 4th spot, and then Pittsburgh 1 point behind them. So that'll be a huge series, as well as Boston and the Rangers. If the Rangers have any hope of kind of falling back, they're going to need teams like Boston. They actually played better than last night, and they were winning for a lot of that game. Ended up losing in overtime, unfortunately. But the Bruins and the Rangers again. I mean, you can't really afford getting swept at home by anyone, but especially the Rangers are going to need to get wins over teams like Boston. Also, another one, of course, as I said, Lightning Panthers. That might be the best series of the weekend. I mean, it's the only one that's the top 2 teams in the division playing each other, in Tampa Bay and Florida. Tampa Bay obviously is the better team, but Florida has played very well this year. And if they're able to take 2 games, or even let's say 3 points from Tampa Bay, that would put them into first place, about 40% of the way through the season, which really no one predicted. So that would be huge for Florida. I mean, these games are both in South Florida as well. So Lightning and Panthers today, as well as on Saturday, a 2-game series there. So that's going to be really important in the really important for them in the Central Division, as those top 2 teams in the division face off. One other thing I wanted to touch on was Willie O'Ree. Willie O'Ree, the Bruins are supposed to have Willie O'Ree retire his number. Of course, the first Black player in NHL history in 1958. Kind of long overdue jersey retirement. He stayed active and involved in hockey and helping hockey off the ice since he retired. I mean, he's been around the game for over 60 years, and still, fortunately, still alive and is still working in the NHL. But the Bruins have decided to move that, retiring his number 22 to next year, to January 18th, 2022, which will be the 64th anniversary of Willie O'Ree's debut in the NHL. Obviously, hoping they can have fans in the stands to give him the well-deserved recognition. Hopefully, of course, there'll be fans in the stands. Willie O'Ree will be able to be there, and all will go well for that, because that is worth universally celebrating. Very few pioneers from the early stages of the game left, and Willie O'Ree is one of those guys. Making his debut in 1958 is the first Black player in the NHL. So hopefully the Bruins are able to have that celebration and honor Willie O'Ree next year. But probably a good idea to delay that until fans are back in the stands. But other than that, that is everything we have for you this week. Hopefully, we get as many games as possible in this week and this weekend. Get as many COVID negatives. Get as many guys as possible off the COVID list. And we'll have a lot to talk about next week. But until then, thank you for listening to today's edition of NHL Lowdown. My name is Jeremy Schooler, and we'll see you on Monday. This is the one Thursday edition this week, but we'll see you over on Monday for the next edition of NHL Lowdown.